right now. Darrell Issa, the congressman from California, is joining us live from Capitol Hill right now. He's the chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. What do you want to hear from the president on this IRS investigation, Congressman?
Well, we expect to hear from the president that he's going to aggressively hold people responsible, and that's good. But the IG's report made it very clear that the institution does not have the controls for the IG even to guarantee that it is not much broader than we now know. In other words, he doesn't know there weren't other scandals like this within the IRS because the internal controls were not good enough. And I think that's the beginning of where Congress is going to want more action.
Do you believe crimes were committed?
Well, certainly, I think the American people believe in that old axiom that the power to tax is the power to destroy, and people had an intent to destroy or to affect the outcome of an election by holding back groups that might have been advocates for smaller government, for constitutional behavior and the like. So it certainly had a disruptive process. In this case, as you've been saying, it's conservatives, but in the past it's also been other groups, African-American groups, civil rights groups, a number of others. So I think what we have to do is fix the IRS once and for all. I look forward to the president getting ahead of part of the story, but let's remember the actions of the IRS in this case conspicuously benefited the president.
Because in the Inspector General's report, among other things, they concluded this. All of these officials stated that the criteria were not influenced by any individual or organization outside the IRS. You buy that?
Well, I certainly think it's possible that the IRS, individuals, for political reasons, made decisions to distort the process. But I also know that a huge number of members of Congress on both the House and Senate side, including the Finance Committee chairman, wrote letters saying investigate the Tea Party. So you kind of have the worst of both worlds. You have members of Congress saying investigate the Tea Parties. You have individuals saying they did it, but that those letters made no difference. The president benefiting made no difference. Again, Wolf, the important thing from the IG, the takeaway that our committee, Oversight Committee, will be doing in addition to Ways and Means, is making sure that controls are put in, sort of like the Enron scandal and the WorldCom scandal. If public companies can't be trusted when they put something out, it affects the market. If the government can't be trusted when they take your taxes, we need to make sure it will be.
The president is about to speak. If you can stand by and listen to the president with us, we'll continue this conversation on the other side. He's going to speak in a few seconds. But Jessica, you're over at the White House. You're getting some information.
Hi, Wolf. I can tell you from a Democratic source that when the president comes out here, he is going to announce that he has asked that the president's going to announce that Treasury Secretary Liu has asked for the acting director of the IRS's resignation and has accepted it. So the acting director of the IRS the president will announce the acting director of the IRS has resigned. That will be the accountability the president has demanded. We will see if that is enough to quell this controversy we have all been so focused on at the IRS, Wolf.
All right, the president is going to walk out to the podium right now. We'll hear what the president has to say. He's speaking on this IRS investigation. You got the headline there from our Jessica Yellen. She's over at the White House. As soon as the president's done, we'll get reaction from Congressman Darrell Issa. Here's the president.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just finished speaking with Secretary Liu and senior officials at the Treasury Department to discuss the investigation into IRS personnel who improperly screened conservative groups applying for tax-exempt status. And I look forward to taking some questions at tomorrow's press conference, but today I wanted to make sure to get out to all of you some information about what we're doing about this and where we go from here. I've reviewed the Treasury Department Watchdog's report, and the misconduct that it uncovered is inexcusable. It's inexcusable, and Americans have a right to be angry about it, and I am angry about it. I will not tolerate this kind of behavior in any agency, but especially in the IRS, given the power that it has and the reach that it has in all of our lives. And as I said earlier, it should not matter what political stripe you're from. The fact of the matter is that the IRS has to operate with absolute integrity. The government generally has to conduct itself in a way that is true to the public trust. That's especially true for the IRS. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to hold the responsible parties accountable. Yesterday, I directed Secretary Lew to follow up on the IG audit to see how this happened and who is responsible and to make sure that we understand all the facts. Today, Secretary Lew took the first step by requesting and accepting the resignation of the acting commissioner of the IRS. Because given the controversy surrounding this audit, it's important to institute new leadership that can help restore confidence going forward. Second, we're going to put in place new safeguards to make sure this kind of behavior cannot happen again. And I've directed Secretary Lew to ensure the IRS begins implementing the IG's recommendations right away. Third, we will work with Congress as it performs its oversight role. And our administration has to make sure that we are working hand in hand with Congress to get this thing fixed. Congress, Democrats and Republicans, owe it to the American people to treat that authority with the responsibility it deserves and in a way that doesn't smack of politics or partisan agendas. Because I think one thing that you've seen is across the board, everybody believes what happened as reported in the IG report is an outrage. The good news is it's fixable, and it's in everyone's best interest to work together to fix it. I'll do everything in my power to make sure nothing like this happens again. By holding the responsible parties accountable, by putting in place new checks and new safeguards, and going forward by making sure that the law is applied as it should be, in a fair and impartial way. And we're going to have to make sure that the laws are clear so that we can have confidence that they are enforced in a fair and impartial way, and that there's not too much ambiguity surrounding these laws. So that's what I expect, that's what the American people deserve, and that's what we're going to do. Thank you very much.
A brief statement, 3 or 4 minutes by the President of the United States, making it clear he is deeply, deeply concerned about what happened at the IRS, announcing that the acting commissioner has resigned. They've asked for his resignation. They've accepted his resignation, also saying that there will be new safeguards to make sure that this never, ever happens again. And he also promised to work with Congress to do the best that they possibly can to fix the problem, to see what happened, to learn from the mistakes, and then move on. Let's get Dana Bash up on Capitol Hill. How's this likely to play up there, Dana?
Well, you know, it's going to be mixed because this certainly won't satisfy either Democrats or Republicans in general, but it certainly is a good first step when it comes to accountability. But let me just give you a little bit of context about who Stephen Miller is and why he was in the hot seat perhaps more than anybody right now, because he is the acting commissioner of the IRS. He, we now know, was told about this targeting last year, in May 3rd of 2012. He did not tell Congress about it. He had various kinds of communications and letters and in meetings and so forth, and he neglected to tell Congress. He didn't disclose it. Never mind that, he didn't just voluntarily call and say, you know what, I just found this out. So that's why, considering the fact that he is the current head, he was the person who was going to absolutely get raked over the coals. He was supposed to testify day after tomorrow, on Friday, before the House Ways and Means Committee. Clearly, don't expect that to happen now, but we'll see. I'm waiting to hear back from the House Ways and Means office about that. But that's why this is so important. The other thing to keep in mind is that the IRS is generally kind of a protected place on purpose. There are few political appointees, only 2. He is one of them. So this was a quick and an easy change for the president to make. Other changes with civil servants are a lot more difficult.
Dana, stand by. Let's get some quick reaction from Congressman Darrell Issa. He's joining us now live from Capitol Hill. He listened to what the president had to say over at the White House. He's the chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Did he satisfy you? Did he satisfy your demands, Congressman?
Well, Wolf, the president set exactly the right tone. I think that immediate relieving of an acting commissioner who had made false statements and misled Congress is an extremely good first step. One thing I can assure you that he asked for, that he's going to get, both the Ways and Means Committee and my committee, with my ranking member Elijah Cummings, have vowed to do bipartisan work. We've started off that way. We're going to stay that way. The IRS is definitely an issue in which what happens wrong today could happen wrong tomorrow to a different group of Americans. So So I think the president's going to find very willing partners on Capitol Hill. I think in this case, we very much take him at his word that he wants to be open and transparent in fixing the system and putting new controls in place.
Do you think more people need to be fired over there at the IRS?
Well, I think the IG made it clear that there were additional people beyond, obviously, the obvious one of somebody who had made false statements. And we're going to, both the Ways and Means and our committee are going to be getting interviews and public testimony to get further on that. But as you said, many of them are civil service. They can be hard to fire, although you can relieve them from doing things with this level of trust. But again, the IG report made it clear that the system did not have the safeguards the American people would expect. And that'll be part of what the administration and Congress, as a legislative body, will have to do, is create that comfort level that this will never happen again.
So you're accepting the president's challenge to work in a bipartisan way to make sure that this never happens again. So he says he's going to do whatever is necessary. Are you ready to do the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where you saw not one but two committees call on a bipartisan basis for this. Elijah Cummings and I will disagree on many things, as you can imagine. But this is one where my ranking member came to me almost immediately. We discussed how to go forward. Remember, it was our committee that set the IG in motion June of last year. And he's equally interested in us getting it right.
Let me quickly get your reaction to the other news of the day. The White House releasing 100 pages of documents, all the emails that resulted in those talking points on the Benghazi attack, the attack that killed 4 Americans, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya, explaining how Susan Rice eventually wound up saying, in effect, what she did say on those 5 Sunday talk shows a few days after the September 11th attack. I assume you welcome the release of these documents.
We do welcome them, although releasing them to the press before releasing them to Congress would seem to be pretty inappropriate. And of course, there are many other documents that they're still not releasing. The idea that they selectively say they have deliberative process protection, as they did in Fast and Furious, and they still are in these documents, is an area where we need to come to grips with the administration when the American people are lied to, realizing that their work product should be open for criticism and review.
You know, as you know, these emails show it was pretty complex, the back and forth between the CIA, the White House, the State Department, the Pentagon. Let me read a couple of quotes. This from page 59. A draft note to the CIA director. We've tried to work the draft talking points, but have run into major problems. The White House cleared quickly, but State has major concerns. The Bureau cleared with a few comments, but asked that justice be brought in. It is evident that will not happen tonight. And Ben Rhodes, who was the official at the NSC, the National Security Council, has asked that this issue be reviewed tomorrow morning. Then on page 94, a little bit later, in an email to the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, the first draft apparently seemed unsuitable because they seemed to encourage the reader to infer incorrectly that the CIA had warned about a specific attack on our embassy. Mike Morrell, the deputy CIA director, noted that these points were not good and he had taken a heavy editing hand to them. So when you hear these, when you see these emails, when you see what was going on, does it satisfy you that all of this back and forth was sort of routine, done in good faith, or was there something sinister there?
Well, we're not accusing anyone of anything sinister. We certainly want to digest these pages, but recognize that these are selective pages. We need to have full access to the deliberative process of the emails, and I think that's one of the areas where we clearly want to have. But remember, Wolf, this is a situation in which the 2 men on the ground, the now deceased ambassador, Ambassador Stevens, who said to his deputy, Greg, were under attack, and Greg Hicks, who's testified that he knew this was a terrorist attack from the get-go. Certainly the president of Libya said so on national television at the same time as Susan Rice was delivering false information. When you look at this train, you have to still ask the question is, how did they go from the correct information to the incorrect information? And isn't 100 pages or more of pushback on the CIA effectively telling the CIA, you've got to change your story?
One final question, Congressman, before I let you go. The exchange you had with Eric Holder today, the Attorney General of the United States. On a totally unrelated matter, the Secretary, the Labor Secretary nominee, it was an angry exchange, and he was furious at you. I'm going to play the exchange for our viewers because I want you to respond to what he accused you of. It was pretty biting.
Mr. Cummings, my ranking member, joined in a letter requesting that we have the full contents pursuant to our subpoena of all 1,200. Will you make them available to the committee based on our bipartisan request?
I will certainly look at the request. It's not something that I have personally been involved in, but I'll look at the request and try to be as responsive as we can. I'm sure there must have been a good reason why only the to and from parts were provided.
Yes, you didn't want us to see the details. Mr. Attorney General, knowing the to and from,
typically do.
Knowing the to and
I'm not going to stop talking now. Characterize something as something
Mr. Chairman, would you inform the witness as to the rules of this committee?
That is inappropriate and is too consistent with the way in which you conduct yourself as a member of Congress. It's unacceptable and it's shameful.
All right, those are pretty blunt words, unacceptable and shameful, the way you conduct yourself, Congressman, as a member of Congress. I want you to respond to what he said.
Well, you know, I have to keep doing my job even if the Attorney General objects. Thomas Perez told us that there were no documents offline. In other words, no private emails. It went from 0 to 1 to 2 to 34 and now 35 responsive emails in which he emailed privately, including one that was a private email to another private email at HUD. These are violations of the Federal Records Act. But more importantly, there were 1,200 emails that we simply want to look at. And this is my ranking member and myself. We don't want copies of them. We want to be able to review them to make sure we're satisfied that there are no additional documents. And in the case of the documents we're talking about, they're redacting. These are 35 emails in violation of the law that Thomas Perez had communications offline. We know that one of them is to the White House. One of them is to a HUD individual related to a quid pro quo that he conducted secretly in St. Paul, Minnesota. This investigation is into the wrongdoing, as we view it, at least not illegal, but wrongdoing by the proposed secretary. Well, he was supposed to be heading up justice in the Civil Rights Division, and areas in which he gave false testimony as to what he did or didn't do. It's a cover-up. We played a tape of his actually instructing somebody in the Attorney General's office in Minnesota not to speak about things. So these kinds of facts, and we produced a fairly lengthy report that's on our website as to Thomas Perez and his actions, these were very appropriate questions. I know the Attorney General would like to have answered for 5 minutes and my time would have been done. All I was trying to do was ask him questions to hope that he would release information that a very, very strong Democrat and I have both asked for.
Darrell Issa is the chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for coming in. Thanks for sticking around, listening to the president, and getting your immediate reaction.